we ready to go, Julie? Okay. This is the call to order for the April 15th, 2026 meeting of the Town of Woodside Planning Commission. We'll start with a Pledge of Allegiance. Roll call, please.
Chair Weaver,
Present.
Vice Chair Gar,
Here.
Commissioner Evans, Commissioner Gonerko,
Here.
and Commissioner Tauber is noted absent.
Are there any changes to the agenda as published?
There are no changes to the agenda. You do have desk items for the one public hearing item we have tonight, and I'll go through that during the presentation.
Given there are no changes to the agenda, we will move on to the public comment period. This is a chance for people to make public comments about items which are not on tonight's agenda, but which are of interest to the Town of Woodside and its Planning Commission. Public comments are limited to 5 speakers maximum of 3 minutes each at the beginning of the meeting. And if we have more speakers, those would be deferred to the end of the meeting. Items not on the agenda cannot be addressed in detail or acted upon tonight, but can be referred to staff and potentially put on a future agenda. So given those restrictions, is there anyone present in the room or on Zoom that would like to speak on a topic not on tonight's agenda?
We have 3 raised hands online. I'm going to start with Fouad.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, my name is Fuad, and I need your help. I'm feeling very weak. I haven't been able to get up off the floor for 45 minutes to an hour. I ate Del Taco, and now
Okay, let's move on to the next speaker.
please help me.
Let's go ahead and mute that speaker. Please mute the, thank you. And let's move on to our third speaker.
Okay, the next speaker is Ben Rodriguez.
Okay. Please mute that speaker. Is there anyone present in the room that would like to speak on a topic not on tonight's agenda, but which is relevant to the Town of Woodside or its Planning Commission? There being no raised hands or anyone stepping up to the microphone, we will at this point close the public comment period. And I believe the next item on the agenda is a presentation from HIP Housing.
Okay.
Okay, you can use the red lever and move the microphone up and down so it's at a convenient height for you.
Oh, okay. Is that better? I don't know if it's on. Okay, it's on? All right, great. Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Laura Fanucchi. I'm the Director of Programs at HIP Housing. I want to thank Sage for inviting me to your meeting tonight. I have a short presentation about the work that HIP Housing does in the community. So Julie's going to be advancing our slides. So HIP Housing, HIP stands for Human Investment Project. That's the legal name of our organization. And our mission is to invest in human potential by improving the housing and lives of people here in San Mateo County. We've been doing that work for over 50 years. Next slide. So HIP Housing offers 4 housing programs, and we also own and manage properties. So I'm going to touch briefly on each one. Our first program is our Housing Resource Hub. We take in about 3,000 calls a year from members of the community that want to learn about HIP housing and or affordable housing here in San Mateo County. And so we create resources to share that information with them. We have a weekly community e-blast where we list affordable housing openings and we email that out to the community. We also create a Google site where we update every 2 weeks affordable housing waiting list openings. And then we have a resource packet that we provide clients that contact our organization that help them navigate how to apply to the county subsidized housing portal, how to apply to the Doorway portal, which is a portal that announces affordable housing waiting list openings, and then also HIP Housing's portal. Next slide. Our housing readiness program is relatively new. We started this program about 2 years ago in the response to the fact that we were seeing many older adults, very low income older adults, who didn't qualify income-wise for our home sharing program, but still needed help with finding housing in our community. We find that most older adults have been in stable housing for many years, and then suddenly something has happened. Either the landlord that they were living with has moved out of the area, or their housing is getting sold, or their rent's being raised, and they're suddenly plunged into San Mateo County's kind of crazy housing market and learning how to navigate that. So we meet with clients to help them understand what they're eligible for and help them apply to the county's subsidized housing portal and also the Doorway portal. We have a collaboration with the Department of Housing where we actually have some scholarship funding to provide a housing scholarship to an older adult that's exiting one of the county operated shelters. The county's having a really hard time moving clients out of the shelters for their intended purpose of stay, which is mostly like 90 days. We find that older adults don't have the ability to increase their income, and so they remain in the shelters. And so our housing scholarship helps to move out of the shelters into something that's more permanent and affordable. So this is a relatively new program of ours, and we're seeing it grow exponentially with the number of seniors that are experiencing homelessness for the first time. Okay, next slide. Our third program is our self-sufficiency program. This is a program for low-income families with dependent children. We provide housing and coaching support for 1 year to 5 years for the adults that are enrolled in school or a vocational program. We have some families that are living independently in their own unit here in San Mateo County, and we help to provide a housing scholarship for them while they're in school. And then HIP Housing also owns 3 houses that we built. 2 are in Redwood City and 1 is in San Carlos. They are 6-bedroom, 3-bath homes, and we usually have 2 to 3 families share the home. The Department of Housing of San Mateo County helps to subsidize the rent, so the rent is very affordable for very low-income families. So we have some families that start in that housing model, and then some families that go into independent living, and we provide coaching and wraparound support for the families, usually 40 to 50 families a year that we're serving in that program. Next slide. So in addition to our housing programs, I'm going to talk about our home sharing program last, but we do also own and manage property here in San Mateo County. We have over 500 units of affordable housing, mostly studio 1-bedrooms and some 2-bedroom units. Some of the properties are project-based Section 8, so the tenants pay roughly 1/3 of their income on rent, and the other units are below market rate. We also do property management for various entities. So we have relationships with the Rotary Club of San Mateo. We manage 2 of their affordable housing properties, Rotary Hacienda and Rotary Floridas in San Mateo. We also manage properties for the city of Foster City. And we have some collaborations with market rate developers that have affordable units within their development, and we partner with them to do tenant selection and income certification. We don't do a lot of new construction, but we do have a new construction project going on right now in downtown San Carlos. We had a 6-unit apartment building that we owned for years, and we partnered with the city and Eden Housing, another nonprofit, to construct 33 units of affordable housing. So it's going to be a mix of 1, 2, and 3-bedroom units, which we're really excited about because we don't have any 3-bedroom units in our portfolio, and we have very few 2-bedroom units. So that property is still under construction. It's right downtown in San Carlos, and hope to be finished with that in October. Okay, next slide. But what we're most known in the community for is our home sharing program. This was the first housing program that the organization started back in 1979. And it's a program where we interview homeowners or renters that have extra space. They either have a room for rent in their home or an accessory dwelling unit. And then we help to match them with a home seeker, usually of a family size of 1 or 2 persons. This program serves all of San Mateo County, and we get funding support from the town of Woodside and also all of the cities in San Mateo County, including the county of San Mateo. We're also included in all of these cities' housing elements as a way to provide affordable housing options through our home sharing program. And we provide technical assistance to other organizations throughout the country that are interested in starting home sharing programs in their community. In fact, here in California, we have probably close to 30 home sharing programs throughout the state, and we've helped a lot of them with their technical assistance in launching programs in their community. We do have collaborations, sorry, my slide got cut off here. We have collaborations with the town of Atherton and Hillsborough. And since creating this presentation, we also are now partnering with Portola Valley and San Bruno on their ADU program. So we have collaborations where we meet with town staff every month to talk about outreach activities to really increase the visibility of HIP Housing's home sharing program, to encourage homeowners that have ADUs to register them with our home sharing program, because we can help do the tenant screening, the income certification, help discuss what the rent is going to be, put together a living together agreement, and are very involved in the housing arrangement, whether it's a home provider that's renting a room or an accessory dwelling unit. So we meet with town staff every month to talk about outreach. We're like for Atherton, we do a lot of their events like Earth Day, their national night outs. We partner with like school districts in Menlo Park. We do social media posts. We host homeowner events where we invite the homeowners to come learn about our program. So we have a lot of activities that we do in each jurisdiction to really kind of raise the visibility of our program, to encourage homeowners with ADUs and rooms. Next slide. So this is just a snapshot of like kind of our screening process. If folks really want to understand like what's the difference between just doing this online or finding roommates or tenants in other ways. But we're very hands-on. So we do the screening, we do background checks, we do have reference checks, we do income certifications, we complete a living together agreement, and we maintain follow-up support for the duration of the match. In Atherton right now, we have 2 matches. So they're both our senior homeowners that have accessory dwelling units, and they're both matched with older adults. We have 1 match in the town of Hillsborough that's been together for almost 6 years. It's with a senior retired couple. They have a 2-bedroom ADU, and they rented it to a local teacher who was in jeopardy of losing her housing and having to leave the state. And so now she's been able to remain in her community. So that's kind of the beauty of this kind of relationship. Next slide. Again, just some examples of who home shares. So we have a lot of school district personnel who are registered with our home sharing program. In fact, about 11% of our home seekers work for school districts. So we have a lot of educators that get recruited to this area, but they can't find affordable housing. And so the option of either renting a room or an ADU becomes much more affordable. Next slide. And so, for our home providers that have the ADU or a room for rent, it really helps to keep them affordable in their own home. We have about 60% of our home providers are older adults. So they may live alone, they may be on a retirement income, and they have extra space in their home, or they have an accessory dwelling unit, and they want to put that empty space to good use. So this is one way to not only help them remain independent in their home, but also to help them financially as well. And for our home seekers, you know, the average rent of a one-bedroom apartment here in this community, I mean, we see people that are renting for like $2,700 to $3,500 for a one-bedroom apartment. And so our room rentals and our ADUs are significantly lower cost. And so it helps to make an affordable housing arrangement for them. And it keeps our workforce local. There's a statistic that over 60% of people who work here in San Mateo County commute from outside of the area. So it really helps to maintain the viability of our community by keeping our workforce local. Okay, next slide. And this is my contact information. We're happy to partner with the town of Woodside on our affordable housing programs. We thank the town for our funding support, and I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any about our organization. Thank you.
Does anyone have questions for Laura?
So one question. So once again, where does the funding come for your services?
Yes, so for our housing programs, it's a variety of funding streams. So we get support from all the cities here in the San Mateo County. We get funding from the County of San Mateo also. We have private foundation support. We also do, you know, annual events, and we have fundraising efforts and donations. But what's really important is that because we own and manage property here in San Mateo County, our rental income also is a sustainable source of funding for our programs. So the funding that we take from our property side helps to pay for all the administrative costs of our programs, so that 100% of contributions goes directly to client services.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Laura, thank you very much for your presentation
Thank
and for the great work that you folks do in the community.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Laura. We'll be in touch. Thank you.
Okay, the next item on tonight's agenda would be the terms of chair and vice chair of the Planning Commission run for 2-year terms and,
I think we have the minutes first.
oh, whoops, we have a consent calendar item first, which is approval of the minutes of our March 4th, 2026 meeting. So if any commissioners, members of staff, or members of the public have any errors, omissions, additions, or clarifications that need to be made to the minutes as published, now is your chance to ask that those changes be made. Comes to that, we would take a motion to approve the minutes of the March 4 meeting.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from the meeting.
Second motion.
Chair Weaver,
Yes.
Vice Chair Gar,
Yes.
Commissioner Evans, Commissioner Gonarco.
Yes.
Given that, it is time to move on to election of a new chair and vice chair of the Planning Commission. So taking this in order, we would entertain motions from the Planning Commission members for a new nominee for chair of the Planning Commission for the next 2 years.
I nominate Matt Gar for chair of the Planning Commission for the next 2 years.
Second,
Chair Weaver,
yes.
Vice Chair Gar, Commissioner Evans, Commissioner Gonarco.
Yes. Yes.
So you guys can get up and the two of you trade seats.
Don't be too eager there. Oh, the board that played is done.
So you think
Very engaging on YouTube.
Okay. I need to bring my agenda up.
So take, next step is we'll take nominations for the vice chair for the next 2 years.
Would anyone like to make a motion? Would anyone like to make a motion for vice chair of the?
So I'd like to nominate Alex Tauber as vice chair for the planning commission for the next 2 years. He's not present, but
Second,
It's acceptable. If for some reason he would decline, we could follow up with that at the next meeting, but it's totally acceptable to have a nomination without him present.
I think I heard a second from
I will second that.
Chair Gar,
Yes.
Commissioner Evans,
Yes.
Commissioner Ganerko,
yes,
Commissioner Weaver.
Yes.
Okay. With that, I believe we will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is the review of the resolution of intention and recommendation to amend the municipal code chapters 151 and 153 regarding ADUs. So shall we move on to that?
Congratulations and thank you, Chair Gar. So as I mentioned earlier, we received a number of desk items and I'll kind of go through those through topic. My proposal here tonight is for me to present kind of on each section, and then I'll ask for questions from the Planning Commission and answer any questions. Once we're done with the presentation and questions and answers from the commission, we'll have the public provide any input they'd like to provide. And then after that, the Planning Commission can deliberate, ask more questions, provide some conclusion. So with that, I will what I'm going to do is just pull up the draft ordinance language, and we can kind of just go through it and as it's written. And so the first, and maybe I should back up just a bit. Some may recall back in June 23, I should have this known. There was a study session provided by the Planning Commission that went over a number of different topics to look how the town could to modify its regulations that would increase flexibility and help increase the production of ADUs. So over the years, the town has provided different ordinance changes that have provided flexibility, and we have had members of the public already taken advantage of some of those ordinances. And so we just will be continuing to work on looking at challenges that people have to creating ADUs and looking at how the town can modify its regulations to maintain consistency with state law, as well as to go even further than state law in some circumstances. And so that is what is before us tonight. We are going to go through some additional items that could provide more flexibility, reduce some of the challenges that people have to construct ADUs. And we will start tonight with an order. And so in chapter 151 is our site development chapter of the municipal code. That's what it's called. The best way to think of that chapter of the code, it primarily deals with grading, drainage, and driveways. And so the town of Woodside currently restricts properties to having one driveway onto their property, although there is a process for Planning Commission approval of a second driveway exception. That process has been in place for a number of years, albeit it has been modified from time to time. And there has been some requests from the public, interest, I think, from Planning Commission and Council related to providing some relief to that requirement for a public hearing process if a second driveway is to serve an ADU. So what we've done is provide an administrative process, so would not require a public hearing, for ADUs to be able to install a second driveway under certain circumstances. So what we see initially here, this is just cleanup language for our existing driveway exception process. And this section, excuse me, this following section here is the proposed language for allowance for an administrative second driveway exception process for ADUs. We've kept a lot of the same kind of safety goals in place from the initial exception process. So with all driveways, there has to be, they have to meet certain line of sight and safety standards, whether it's a singular driveway or a second driveway. These are things that a line of sight distance study, something that an engineer would prepare. They look at curvatures of the road. They look at the speed limits on the road, and they provide a site distance analysis, is what it's called, which then is reviewed by our engineering department. So we would keep that obviously in place. We are looking at, whenever we're trying to provide additional flexibility, we also want to be careful of people taking advantage of it for things that aren't directly related to the construction of an ADU. And there are many instances where it just makes more sense to have a second driveway for an ADU. Some extreme examples and very easily to imagine examples. We have some properties that are bisected by a creek. So example, there's properties on Manzanita that back all the way up to Whiskey Hill, and they are bisected by a creek. Say you have your house on Manzanita, but you'd like to do an ADU off Whiskey Hill, instead of building a bridge across the creek, one could do a second driveway. In an instance like that, it would make a lot of sense for that ADU to not have to go through a special hearing process for that. So we've looked at things like if someone is proposing a second driveway to access an ADU, that would require less paving than just, say, extending a small extension off of their existing driveway. That would be something that would be looked at. We look at that's only proposed, the driveway is only proposed to serve the ADU. We want to make sure it's not kind of a tangent to really serve something else or the main residence on the property. So it's specifically focused for that. And then the number 4 is really just trying to minimize the appearance of these second driveways. So often people will have fencing on their property. If they have no fencing, that's fine. They don't need to have fencing. But if they do have fencing, try to have that vehicle gate look as close to the fencing as possible with minimal pylons. And that would kind of minimize the visual appearance of this second driveway, which has always been a concern about additional driveways on the property. There are some instances, even one of the desk items I know of a property, they have an old historic pylon that's not used as a driveway now. In those instances, we wouldn't make them tear that out and put in a regular fence if they were proposed to use that for a second driveway. But the idea is to really just maintain the character that exists now. And then number 5 is just, clarifying that we should not be proposing these second driveways in environmentally sensitive areas or in areas that are really have really significant steep slopes immediately adjacent to the driveway, which would cause some real carving into a hillside and significant retaining walls. And the last one is just indicating that if you already have 2 driveways, we wouldn't use this process for a 3rd or 4th driveway. So we do have, we received out of the different desk items we have, we received 3 items specifically related to this topic. And all of them shared the same idea, and staff is very open to that idea. They are suggesting, hey, this ordinance works. It just does, it says only for 1 ADU. And let's say someone was building 2 ADUs. They were grouping them near each other to come off this proposed second driveway. Staff sees no issue with that. If it's acceptable to the commission, we can easily, if acceptable to the commission, literally, taking away the word A right here and making all our references to accessory dwelling units. So just to go back. So we remove this, and then we can make the references to accessory dwelling units plural. And if that was something that the commission is interested in, we could make that change. So with this, just on this particular topic, if there's any questions of the commission for staff, be happy to answer any of those questions.
Yeah, so a couple of things in some of the letters and also in my own experience, the when you're designing these, there was this request for the fire department to be able to drive in and turn around. And for me, and a lot of less than 10,000 square feet seemed ridiculous to even get that question, but it was a question I had to go deal with and get a response on. For these larger lots that do have large properties, with something that has a ADU that's sort of close to an edge and has its own driveway, should we be saying something about that kind of ridiculous statements of needing a fire truck to come in and turn around?
The fire truck has its standards and people will need to meet fire district standards. If it's with regards to our local standards, if the fire district does require a fire truck turnaround, we do have exemptions in our paved area section. So the turnaround itself doesn't count against their paved area standards. Sometimes if people have a really long driveway, they have to actually do a turnout as well.
But I mean, I get if it's a long driveway and it's back part of the property and the property's 3 acres big, but if they're going to put the ADU on the corner, is that so? I guess what you're saying is the fire truck turnaround rule is not in the town.
That's correct. Yeah. So we wouldn't want to put something in our municipal code directly related to that. So in those instances and where it may not be required, it's something we can help support that applicant with the fire district, but it is a fire district requirement. Yep.
Second is in some of the letters, they talked about having multiple driveways for multiple ADUs. Are we thinking that's a bad idea?
At this point, the town has never contemplated allowing more than 2 driveways on a property. And so the idea is really to ensure that people can have easy access to a proposed ADU. And so if they are proposing if they have existing ADUs, they obviously are existing and have access to those units. For proposed ADUs, they should be looking at grouping those together with their proposed second driveway or access off of their primary driveway. Staff hasn't really analyzed looking at a third or fourth driveway because people want multiple separate driveways for multiple different ADUs. We'd really try to encourage people to keep
That hasn't come up yet.
No, we haven't had any significant concerns or challenges that people have run into for that.
Okay, my last question may not be related to this specifically, but I've read somewhere that there's either a state law being contemplated or debated about being able to automatically carve out ADUs from a certain lot. Is that something that the town has thought about yet?
In terms of for sale?
For separation of ownership, sort of.
Yeah, so there is a state law that allows for cities to optionally decide if they want to provide a mechanism in which people can purchase an ADU separate from the primary unit while it's still one property. The town council has not opted to look at an ordinance for that at this time.
There's an option for the town.
Yeah, so the state law, it's not a mandatory requirement. It's a state law that they provided that is an option. It's an option that cities can pursue.
All right, that's my son. If he calls 3 times.
Understood.
Thank you. Okay, bye.
Okay, Sage, what I do have one question on this one, and that's on criteria 3. Of the draft language that's in there is only serve the proposed ADU. If this goes into municipal code and you're making a literal interpretation of that, then that would theoretically bar a proposed second driveway that served the ADU, but then it just coincidentally happened to provide better access to a pool house or a storage building or a barn or something like that. Given that the intent that you outlined was to of these changes is to make it easier to create ADUs. And the second driveway would be the one and would be the primary means of access to an ADU that would be in a location that would otherwise be inaccessible. My suggestion would be to consider tweaking the language to, instead of saying only serve the ADU, to say that the driveway is needed to provide a practical means of access to the proposed ADU.
It's totally open to that. There, we don't find a significant concern that we can look at modifying that language.
Yes, it would just be to make the language better fit what seems to be the intent of this.
Well, that makes sense. You know, there might be times in which, you know, somebody does this short driveway to an ADU, but yet they can spur off of that to connect to their primary driveway. And as with some of the letters that we've seen, just internal, more circulation provides better fire safety and things of that nature. Yeah, we're definitely open to that. With that, I'll note, you know, we're going to get through some of the other comments too tonight. Some of the other items that are suggested from the public are necessarily directly related to some of these things. And what I want to note is the council schedule is very full in the near future. So we don't have a specific date in which we're going to the council. We know that we wouldn't come to the council before June. And so with tonight's conversation, with these ideas, what I would like to do is get the direction from the Planning Commission at the end, and we can, what I would propose to do is bring this back probably the second meeting in May, that we could show any of these changes that are made based on the comments that we heard tonight. And this would be one of them, should the rest of the commission agree to that.
That's all I had.
Okay, so the questions I have, so first on pylons, can you just describe a little bit more what we mean by pylons versus fences? And
Sure. So a pylon is going to be a support for a gate that will be kind of the hinge for the gate. And so when doing a pylon, you might have a wooden wire fence and just a, you know, 12-inch squared wood post probably is going to support your gate, but having some type of minimal metal post as opposed to another, you know, 2x2 or 3x3 stone pylon. The idea is to blend it more into the existing fence. So that's the intent with that.
And I think my other question was with respect to the turnaround and connections. I think I don't know that there's any net new question on this, but I think considering the ability to have circulation for the driveway to, I think the intent needs to be, look, the driveway is to serve a net new ADU that's being built, but if it connects on site, that really does feel like the type of thing that
Yeah, no,
that we should look at.
Given the comments we heard tonight and from the desk items,
Yep.
It's a very reasonable request and something that we will focus on when we bring this back.
I think that's all I had. And Sage, how we're going section by section?
Yes. So I'll just continue to move on here.
Okay.
I'm not going to go into these in detail. These are just definitions. We've made some modifications. These are really to make sure we are up to date with current state law. So we've made modifications. Our definitions were in pretty good shape. We've just made some minor clarifications, and there are really no substantive changes to these definitions. So unless there's any questions, I'll just move on to the next piece. So, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, the efficiency kitchen.
Mhm.
So we are making a change there with respect to cooking, correct?
This is clarifying what it didn't include the cooking piece before, and it just said, well, it said appliances for food preparation, and this is looking at something that a permanent cooking facility, so this is a term used, and so the question is, when you're doing an ADU, you know, do I have a stove? Do I have, you know, you can have a wet bar, but that's not a kitchen. So that wouldn't qualify as an ADU. Whereas an ADU, they have permanent cooking facilities. And what that has been taken into is that it's essentially when you install a stove, an oven, it requires venting. And so that's something that does require a building permit. So the town has always looked at what is a permanent cooking facility. It is something that's going to require the venting. And what we wanted to clarify in this efficiency kitchen is that someone could have that, but they could have other just cooking appliances. So as many of us, including myself, we buy all these different, ways to cook that are just kind of plug-in appliances that are 3-in-1 and can do all these different things. So if people are doing something like that, they don't have to have the oven or the venting. We just want to make sure that they have some cooking appliances as part of it. So it's clarifying that.
Okay, so it reads may or may not include a permanent stove / conventional oven. Does it read elsewhere that any cooking appliances are required?
It's just a cooking facility with appliances is the lead into that. So which means the cooking facility may or may not be a permanent cooking facility.
Yeah, I think I wonder if we should maybe consider clarifying what a cooking facility actually is. Part of the reason I ask is when I was getting finaled, I had a temporary set of appliances and was told by the inspector that I didn't need them and go ahead and return them. So it was sort of unclear there in terms of is that required? So I think it would be good to just specify what a cooking facility
Yeah, so they should have, inspected, the venting and stuff would have had, is what's really getting permitted as opposed to the installation of the stove itself. So if someone hasn't, if their plans show for that venting and that cooking facility, that would be what's inspected.
Okay, so we are saying that the venting is required.
We're saying for an efficiency kitchen, you can have it, but you don't have to. And the efficiency kitchens are directly related to the JADUs. Whereas if you're doing a regular ADU, you're going to do a permanent cooking facility. You're not going to just have the appliances.
Okay. I think my question is,
we want to ensure that the ADUs will always have a cooking facility as part of it.
Okay. Do we have a definition of cooking facility in the code somewhere, or is that something
It's just
referenceable?
the permanent cooking. We do have a definition of cooking facility, and it's the permanent. I'd have to look at the exact words, but it's something we've worked with the building department on. And it's the venting itself, which makes it permanent.
Okay.
Yep.
I think it may be helpful to just clarify what the reference is to that, just for readability of the code, because I know I've actually talked with a number of folks who get confused over this one.
We'll look at how to better clarify that. Okay, if there's no other questions, we'll move on. Okay, so floor area. This is something that in the study session from the Planning Commission as well as Town Council and from residents, and we've seen in some letters here tonight, that currently the code indicates that every lot doesn't have to count up to 800 square feet for ADUs on a property. And people have asked to increase that exception. And so what we've done is to clarify, to propose that people, up to 1,200 square feet, so giving people another 400 square feet that could be applied to ADUs on their property that would not account against their maximum residence size or their total floor area allowed on the property. We've had some letters here. We have at least, 5 of the letters tonight. 2 of them kind of just generally supported any increase, whereas the other 3 specifically spoke to looking at the increase up to 1,500 square feet. And looking at this change, and we're specifically just looking at D1 right now. When looking at this change, staff contemplated, the town does allow ADUs up to 1,500 square feet. This isn't directly changing anything for that. It's just simply saying that people get an extra 400 square feet than previously, that they for an ADU, meaning they could use that 400 square feet somewhere. If they use it for an ADU, they could use that somewhere else on their property. We could simply change it for all lots up to 1,500 square feet. We do know that when this first came into play, the 800 was specifically because town had to require at least an 800 square foot unit. On smaller lots, I mean, adding another 700 square feet on top of the 800, going to 15, you know, could seem a bit much to some neighbors, say. But it's up to the commission if they want to just up the number to 1,500 square feet, leave it at 1,200, reduce it below that, whatever you may find to be adequate. Another thing that could be looked at is we could hold a number for lots that are an acre or less than an acre in size, and then properties that are larger, maybe provide those with a larger exception. That would have less impacts when they have larger properties. So those are just two different ideas, but there are members of the public that have asked to increase that exception up to 1,500 square feet. And if there's any questions on that, let me know. Also, again, we'll have public input, and at the end, you can deliberate where you want to go with that in particular, but if there's questions, I'm happy to answer those.
So we'll discuss it later.
In terms of, so if there's questions to answer, now would be the time. But yes, in terms of discussion, it'd be good to get everybody's input, and then the commission can decide where they want to end with that item. Okay. Okay, so looking at D2, this is a new section. This is out of new state law, and what I'll do is kind of just jump a little bit ahead to kind of intertwine this with E1. Some of the initial state laws that have passed required cities to allow for up to 150 square foot expansions to provide ingress and egress when creating a JADU, and that has been in our code. The state law has now been changed. They don't explicitly call out the JADU anymore, but they do explicitly call out the need for this 150 square foot expansion for ADUs. So we want to make sure that that is in our code, consistent with state law. And the language in here is consistent with state law, meaning sometimes people are just trying to add an extra 150 square feet, but all they need to do is put a door in. 150 square feet, be a bedroom. So what we've used is the state law language to say, yes, you can go up to the 150 square feet if it's necessary. But if you're already maxed out and you just need to carve out a little bit area, we have some instances people are like raising plate heights a little bit and it's affecting their floor area the way we do floor area here. We want to make sure that that flexibility is there. So that's the proposal, using the same language just to clean up the JADU stuff. We don't want to take that away, even though state law doesn't explicitly require it anymore. But so this is what we proposed for those two expansions if needed.
So state law does not have any requirements with this 150 at this point.
For the JADU, it doesn't explicitly call that out anymore, but it does now explicitly call it out for the ADU, that we have to allow for some expansions to create these ADUs. So if someone has an attached ADU they're proposing, again, we have other instances where people are converting buildings and they might need to bump out a little area. We're starting to deal with things on hillsides, so that kind of creates some situations sometimes. And so this will be consistent with state law. And so we're just making sure we have that in our code.
So the effect of this is to say you get the 150 if you're already maxed out. If you're not already maxed out, you don't get the 150 because it counts towards the TFN.
Correct. And you would just get what is just necessary to provide that ingress egress to that unit.
So would this create then an incentive to sort of phase construction projects in a way that people build up to the maximum with a holdback of 150, which then leads to construction projects that last longer?
If people want to phase development in a way to get an extra 150 square feet, that's something that could occur. Move on. This is all existing language in our code. Okay, so this is something that just really hasn't been addressed in our code since we've been implementing ADU ordinances. ADUs, so there's this term used, basic setbacks, in our code. So that's kind of your normal setbacks that are required, that everyone's kind of used to, your side setbacks, front setbacks, rear setbacks. Whereas everyone has kind of come to learn now that, an ADU can be as close as 4 feet to a side or rear property line. And the question starts to become, how large can those overhangs be? Our code currently, to put ADUs aside, before any of these changes to state law, and still currently, a house can have a 6-foot encroachment into a front or rear setback for an overhang or other types of features like balconies, and go 3 feet into a side or rear setback. Well, we have an ADU that's 4 feet away from a side property line. How far should that be able to go into that 4 feet? Eaves are functional, obviously, for drainage in many cases in construction. They're also a very common design feature. You can design things without eaves. But with that, what we wanted to do was clarify that, we've had some people trying to do these large patio covers with an ADU. And so you have this 800 square foot unit, and now they're trying to do, another 700 square feet of covered patio, really enlarging this structure. And we've really had to look at these things case by case. And what we believe to be very reasonable is just to clarify that once you're starting to encroach into your basic setbacks for an ADU and getting closer to your neighbor's properties, that you keep those to a maximum of 18 inches. And so that is what is proposed for this section 5 here. For section 6, again, this is just kind of another reasonable concept, that we've run into with permitting ADUs over the years. So, HVAC units are most common. Sometimes have people with tankless water heaters that get attached to the building on the exterior wall. And what we've done just at the staff level, we've really had to just make an interpretation call here, because we can't deny an ADU because they have an HVAC unit that's next to it. If someone's proposed an 800 square foot ADU that's 4 feet from a side or rear property line, you don't have an HVAC unit that's 40 feet away. It's just, I'm not an HVAC specialist, but my understanding, it should be as close to the building as possible. So what we've done is saying, hey, look, you can have your mechanical equipment, it's serving this unit, it makes sense, but you can't be any closer than 4 feet to a side or rear property line. So we just wanted to make sure that it's clear in the code that it is allowed, and that you just keep those particular features within line of kind of the intent and spirit of the state law to say ADUs can be as close as 4 feet. So if you are in a corner where you have two sides, one's 4 feet from the side, one's 4 feet from the rear, then you just need to put it on one of the other two sides that doesn't make it any closer than 4 feet to the side property line. So that's the intent behind number 6. So if there's any questions for 5 or 6?
One question is, how do we define immediately adjacent?
Next to, it is against, we can define a distance of how far it can be away, if that's preferred.
Within 12 inches of or something?
Yeah, again, I'm not an expert in mechanical equipment. I could do a little bit of further discussion with the building department. To me, if someone's putting something 20 feet away from it, 5 feet away, that's pretty clear it's not immediately adjacent, but we'll talk to the building department and see if it makes sense to, there may be some requirement of how close it has to be. So we can look at that a little bit closer too.
Okay, thank you.
Moving right along. It's just cleanup language, just clarifying state law changes, we follow the new codes. Okay, so this is something that is kind of what we were making this change, somewhat in relation to increasing the TFA exception. And currently, this was put in place in the code because under state law that if you can't have a local zoning regulation that would amount to making it infeasible for someone to construct an 800 square foot unit. And further, it used to, state law used to say that you could impose a front setback. Now it has language that you can impose a front setback, but if that makes it infeasible to construct the unit, that the towns, cities have to make an exception to that. So we've, in past ordinances, we've removed the hard restriction on the front setback. And what we've looked at is providing a little bit more flexibility for ADUs, for staff to work with folks in unique circumstances. Our past, kind of easy example of this was saying, hey, what if kind of the only place to put an ADU was in a slope in excess of 35%? Staff should be able, that's kind of a local zoning thing, and staff should be able to provide some flexibility there. Well, since then, we've changed our code to allow ADUs to be in slopes in excess of 35%. So that's not my go-to example anymore, but I will suggest a couple things, which also does relate to a desk item that I'll get to at the end. That there's one of the more common examples is paved area and surface coverage. When you have a new ADU, at a minimum, you have to have, there's building code requirements for landings outside of exit doors. So there's going to have to be some type of patio, porch, something that meets. But if someone's maxed out on paved area, the town has allowed this exception in the past based on this. So that's an area in which flexibility could be done. But it was limited to only units that were 800 square feet. So if someone was proposing to do a 900 square feet, 1,000 square foot unit, that staff would still say, still have to go do a variance for something like that. And so what we're trying to do, and same goes with the front setback. We have another project. It's a great example. The house is on the San Andreas Fault. The property behind it is a creek that splits it from another piece of the property behind it. And really the only place to put an ADU is in the front setback. And so we've worked with them under this exception and consistent with state law that they can do an 800 square foot unit in that area. Because that gets them outside of the fault zone area. And what we're looking here is just if the commission and council agree that it provides staff with flexibility to look at some of our local zoning standards. If someone wants to do up to a 1,200 square foot unit, that gives us more, we could have flexibility with that unit, not just up to 800 square feet. So we're just proposing to increase the flexibility that staff can provide in, I don't want to say waive zoning standards, but modify zoning standards when necessary, because that is the feasible place to put the ADU. So that's what this is proposing.
This is just to make sure they don't, if it's truly unable to be put on the fault line, then they don't need to come to ASRB and planning to get it approved.
Right. So in the case that I cited, right now they could do the 800 square feet into the front setback. But if this was changed the way it's proposed, they could make that unit up to 1,200 square feet as opposed to 800. So it provides a little bit more flexibility at the staff level without having to go through the variance process.
And just to confirm that, so we were talking about the 800 to 1,200 earlier, which is what are folks entitled to. This one is an additional layer of flexibility. There's no reason this couldn't stay at 800.
That's correct. That's correct.
If they want to do a larger one, they'd come essentially to planning for
that is correct. So yeah, so you could still exempt more square footage from the TFA and hold this at a different number.
And how are folks demonstrating the infeasibility of construction? What's the standard for that? We don't want to make it overburdensome. So
Typically, people are going to need surveys, and typically people have surveys. Those will be a big help in identifying some of the constraints. When someone, whether it's an ADU or a house, you just can't build a new one on a fault line. So people that are on or near fault lines, they're going to have to demonstrate that anyway through geotechnical investigations. So we look at those pieces of information. We look at, environmentally sensitive areas, primarily in Woodside, we deal with the stream corridors. So those are easily identifiable. We'll go do a site visit if necessary to kind of look at where the top of bank may be for property. So we like to keep it open because we want it to be a low bar in terms of those providing that it's not feasible. We had another example, someone else showed us that they could fit 1,500 square feet, outside of a front setback, but now they want to just move that into the front setback. And well, saying, well, you just showed us that you could meet the front setback, so that is not a problem. So we try to just keep it very simple at those kind of basic issues, steep slopes, faults, and environmentally sensitive areas tend to be the biggest constraints.
So as they're going through the process, it's a matter of they make this case directly to planning.
That's correct.
They're kind of a stage gate. Like, how does that?
Yeah, no. So sometimes people can just show up one day and never talk to us and put it on their plans. And here's my reasoning. But we encourage people to meet with us, and often we'll meet with folks once, if not many times. And so, yes, if they have some issue, hey, look, we want to put it here. Sometimes it's the only place they can put the septic system to serve the ADU. Whereas, okay, you could fit the ADU there, but now you can't put the septic system anywhere else because it can only be in that location. And so that's another thing that we kind of look at with folks. So yeah, we try to just be very open and reasonable with people, and providing, they'll explain their situations to us. And like I said, we're happy to do site visits and whatever we can to help make it very clear. And it's also very clear when we make that determination, if the neighbor has a concern, we can say, this is how we got to that conclusion.
And so it mentions the planning director shall determine which regulations may be reduced. Is it also true that basically if the planning director determines it is not feasible, that's also your call?
That's correct. Right. So you're showing that it's not feasible, and we'll concur with that, or we'll say, wait, you can't fit that size unit here. So now there's more, if we up the square footage, there's more flexibility for that. There's the same flexibility for a larger unit.
Okay, makes sense. Sorry, a lot of my comments are having gone through processes and just trying to understand the precision. It might be useful here to specify that it's a planning director call on that. And I don't know if there's something about what feasibility means or what folks are supposed to present. That's probably helpful, because I think, like, for variances, it's quite clear usually. Like, there's a form, et cetera. Like, how does one determine feasibility would probably be quite helpful to applicants.
Great, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on here to the number of ADUs on a property. So as many may recall, what came out of part of the housing element was that on properties that are an acre or larger, that the town would amend our codes to allow 3 ADUs and a JADU, so a total of 4 ADUs on a property plus a house. That was in a very specific, I believe the state HCD was looking for us to just implement that into the SR district. And when we moved that through the process, I definitely know at the council level, and I think at the planning commission as well, but there was saying, hey, look, if we're going to allow this for lots of a certain size, we should just allow it on all lots of that size. And so that's what the town did. So the town went a little bit beyond what the state had required of us and allowed these 3 ADUs plus a JADU on parcels that are an acre or larger. So There is a part of the government code known as Government Code Section 66323. The state will often refer to these as state exempt ADUs. And under this state code, every property has to allow 3 ADUs in these three different types. So one is a JADU, and one is you have to allow a conversion of space. So that could be a conversion of a storage building, a detached garage, a barn, as we noted with our last amendment. It could be a conversion of part of your residence. And so this is a conversion of space. The state, you have to allow the JADU, you have to allow the conversion of space. And then the third one is one we've kind of been accustomed to, is that every property has to be allowed to have at least one new detached ADU that's can be 800 square feet and 16 feet tall, and as close as 4 feet to a side or rear property line. So we've changed our code to make sure it's clear that people can implement that type of unit. That type of unit doesn't get held to the 11-foot plate height limit, just gets to go up to the 16 feet. And what we've done here with this section of the code, because the code currently allows folks to have one JADU and one attached or detached ADU, we're saying if people want to be consistent with state law with these 3 types of JADs that are quote unquote the state exempt ADUs, they can have those 3 units because it is allowed by state law. And so the town could just say everyone's allowed to, those smaller properties can have more. That's another option. What we are doing, as we've kind of done with this, is trying to provide more flexibility, taking somewhat smaller steps, incremental steps, to be careful of how impactful it could be to neighboring properties. And so we're explicitly clarifying, although it says one JADU and one attached or detached, if you want the 3, you follow what is allowed by the government code section. So that is the proposal for this particular.
That's an asterisk. Is the asterisk up higher?
No, I appreciate the point. It's an asterisk and no, this is, oh, sorry. Yes. Thank you. Because your very point, it's very important to always have the asterisk. So yes, it is right here. Yeah, no. You don't want to have just an asterisk without what it refers to. So yes, that's the placement of it. So they get this limitation to JADU and one detached or attached, but there's this asterisk saying if you're following what's allowed by government code, you can have the 3. So this number 6 is just to also clarify what's allowed by section 66323, which what I just mentioned. So if people are converting a portion of their main dwelling, someone could convert a barn, 3,000 square foot barn, to an ADU. Under 66323, it doesn't specify the size in which you can convert a building. So with a main residence, someone could say, I want to convert 3,000 out of my 8,000 square foot house into an ADU. And under 66323, that would be allowed. What we're stating here is if someone has already used that conversion under 66323, they can still have an attached ADU, but it can't be larger than 1,500 square feet. So they wouldn't do the conversion of the 3,000 and add the 1,500 square foot attached ADU. That's the primary example of what this is getting at. So because we have standards in our code for attached ADUs, that's a little bit further down, but that's the point of what this is doing here, saying, hey, look, you can convert larger spaces. That's allowed. But can't convert multiple large spaces. So if you want that additional attached ADU, you would follow the maximum standard for that attached ADU, since you've already converted over that. If you've converted an 1,000 square foot building to an ADU and it meets code, that wouldn't impact this. This is just clarification language of the proper code sections being referenced. This is coming straight out of state law. We're just clarifying and making sure that everything here is consistent with the state law. It's just again, clarifications. So this is our last piece of the proposed ordinance. Through the housing element, we have a program that says look at developing some type of amnesty program for ADU, unpermitted ADUs, and how they can be legalized. And from a planning standpoint, it's been a bit of a struggle to figure out how best to implement something like that, because a lot of what we've already built into our code makes it pretty easy and straightforward to convert a building. So if someone had a detached garage, even under our laws, if you converted a garage, you don't have to replace the parking. And so from a zoning standpoint, a lot of the conversion issues have already been addressed. The struggle has been really with ensuring people that have done something that's unpermitted, that they comply with building code regulations. And, you know, we could say it's okay to convert your garage into an ADU. You've already done it. Now come in for permits. Zoning wise, it's pretty clear. We almost have nothing to look at. But then they get hit with the building code requirements. And that's been a real problem for folks. And so in 2024, the state passed what was known as AB 2533. Since been replaced just for a renumbering. But it is now this new government code section 66311.7. And what we're doing here is that's state law. It needs to be implemented. There is, for units that were constructed prior to January 2020, I know people question how do you always identify when it was built if something was unpermitted. There's certain building techniques that the building department will look at, but that the town has a checklist in terms, there's still a level of health and safety requirements that need to be met, but it may not require every little detail that would say be for new construction today. And that checklist has been developed. We have a member of the public here who's actually been really great and builds ADUs and helps us go through some of this stuff and has different examples. And she can maybe speak to that too tonight. But we want to ensure that we are implementing that process. So it's primarily a building department function from the planning department standpoint. We are working with the building department to make sure that function is in place and that we try to make it as clean and smooth as possible. We just simply wanted to, just like our pre-approval program that we did previously, we wanted to keep the language very simple. We wanted to make sure that it is functional and that the building department makes sure it implements the laws, but we have some flexibility to continue working on the process and making it as clear as possible. We do have some desk items that spoke to that tonight. And the one suggestion that came out of those desk items was asking for the town to be able to provide a building inspector inspection of the unit prior. It's a very good point. You know, once you spend a bunch of money designing plans and then you realize you have other stuff that you have to figure out, and that's just going way beyond what you ever thought you were going to have to do. People who want to enter this process in good faith and legalize these unpermitted units should have some mechanism to help minimize any down the road problems that may have been unforeseen initially. The state law does state does indicate that, that jurisdictions, basically have to allow, they don't have to, they can't require it, but they have to allow, for property owners to come in with a third-party general contractor inspection. So someone can go hire a general contractor on their own. They can use the checklist that the town provides, and they can provide them with feedback. I believe what is so that's in place. People are allowed to do that. They can always hire someone on their own. I believe what is being suggested in the desk items we received tonight was actually having a town inspector go out there. And, you know, to me, it's something, talk with the building department. We look at capacity. We look at should there be a cost associated with it? And I look at this more of a policy decision. So it's something that, you know, with the desk items, and if the town on the planning commission would like us to talk with the council further, is to bring this to the town council and indicate, you know, what that might cost the town to do. Does the town want to implement a cost for that? Currently, we waive most building permit fees for ADUs. And I'll note that our building inspectors are contract building inspectors. And so we really look at this as a policy decision. Does the town want to look at that cost and capacity is really the two questions. So do our building inspectors have capacity? Is that just a matter of expanding the contract with the current company that holds the building inspections? But I would suggest it's not something that we should necessarily codify. So it gives the town the flexibility to implement things like this. But to put in our code that the town shall provide a building inspection, I really think it's a good policy decision for the town council. If that's something they want to implement, they could do that by resolution, and it wouldn't have to be codified. And every time it gets changed, we have to change the code.
Are there actually any penalties for having one and not getting it permitted?
It's a good question. So if someone's following this process, no. You know, typically prior to this process, if someone builds something without permits, it could incur 3 times the permit fee. Should note we waive most of the permit fees for ADUs. So
3 times 0? Okay.
So the town does not have significant fines for anything like this.
I agree with you on the no need to put in the code thing. I mean, this does seem like a town policy of, I think we kind of want these, right? We want people to permit them and get them in their numbers.
Yep.
And so almost like having a international amnesty for anybody and some sort of ombudsmanship to get them to the point where they're coded safe.
That's the point. It increases more housing, legitimate housing, as well as safer housing. So for that reason, the goal is really to try to continually, you know, make this easier.
You guys know where they are?
No, I would say no. You know, if there is a complaint that comes in, the code enforcement process is started, and that's simply to get someone into compliance.
The question I have, based on the desk item, and so someone comes forth, goes into this program, they get hit with a set of code issues, the cost spirals. Are they able to pull back, or it's once they've started the process? Sort of in it?
It's a good question. So we had someone come in prior to this state law being in place. They just want to come in. Hey, you guys need ADUs? I'll do that. And they've come in. They had some issues. They were drawing the plans themselves. They still needed to come up to certain building code requirements. I did reach out to them since it's been in place. I don't know. I think they may have sold their property, but it wasn't a code enforcement case. It wasn't something that was an inquiry that was brought to the town for enforcement. So because of that, the town is reactive to inquiries. We did not pursue code enforcement. If there's health and safety violations that the town is made aware of, the building department will look at those to ensure that those are corrected. We're looking at, we want to make sure there's not wiring hanging out everywhere, things of that nature.
Just one policy question that occurs to me with respect to the prospect of the building department going out and doing pre-inspection of unpermitted ADUs is in addition to whether uh, there would be a charge for this service, it would be also whether it would just be a verbal report by the inspector, or if a written report is provided, and then also if that written report is going to, by its existence, be an implicit statement by the building department or the town on limiting the scope of the required changes. Because it's sort of, I mean, doing renovations, it's a big can of worms, so scope creep is always an issue, and is the town going to be on the hook if the building inspector initially said something didn't have to be done and then things changed?
Yeah, no, so from what I hear is, would that say, I don't have to fix something that I didn't see behind the wall? And I think the answer is no, there's still a possibility that you may have to fix more. There are certain things that would not be inspected, like things that are behind a wall when someone opens up a wall to make certain modifications. So there are a lot of, in the checklist, kind of there's some, think of the right word, not caveats necessarily, but the inspection is based on what was seen and inspected, and people will need to be aware that there could be additional items that could come into play that just aren't identifiable by that inspection. So that goes through the proposals. I do want to,
Sage,
yep,
I
go
had a
ahead.
question on actually the prior one before we got
Yep.
here, which was bottom of page 13. Owner occupancy is required in any residence that contains a junior ADU, except as described below. So if you build a JADU, you have to stay in your house for life?
No, the owner of the property has to live in one of the units. So if you sell your property, that whoever owns the property has to live in one of the two units.
So if somebody, say I build a JADU, I have a job requirement that brings me to Chicago, I have to sell the house?
Or you wouldn't rent out the JADU.
Can't rent out the JADU, can rent out the rest of the,
Because the JADU will be part of the house. It's always part of the house. It's the JADU is something that can be closed off. So that's kind of the idea of JADUs, that, you have a shared door that you can close. Even a JADU, you don't have to have its own bathroom. A JADU can actually share a bathroom with the rest of the house. And so the idea of JADs when they first came up is that I have this extra bedroom, I can close it off, and I can put in this little efficiency kitchen. And then so that way it just turns into the house.
yeah, I think I'm just struggling with the language on this because it really reads, maybe it's just me, but it reads as if the fact that there's a JADU requires that owner occupancy is required for the life of this structure, which seems problematic.
Understood. We'll look at that a little bit closer. The intent is that you don't rent out two units, the JADU and the house, that you have someone on site.
This one,
Well, it is, part of this comes out of the state law, which is why you get into these requirements about government agencies and land trust. And so I'll look at a couple of things. At one, to make sure that this is more clear. And then two, if the town wants to pursue it, maybe saying, hey, we just don't even want to have this requirement in place. If I'll double check, it may be that the state law doesn't require that you have that in place. And so I'll look at one, making this more clear, shall we keep it in place? And two, is there the option to just remove the requirement completely. And if that's an option, we'll present that as well.
Makes sense. Yeah, I think that the clarification that would be helpful would be, I think, exactly what you said, which is it also wouldn't be required if the owners, I'm not going to say this right, but the owner's not trying to rent out 2 units, right? Like if they can rent out the whole thing, but not carve it up.
Yep. So, okay, so what I'd like to also now just to continue with is we've received a few desk items that were not directly interwoven with what we were doing today. And I'd like to bring up a couple, and thankfully Steve Patrick is here tonight, so we can help bring up his items. He brought up 2 items. One was related to paved area and possibly allowing a larger exception for paved area related to ADUs. So a very good question. It's actually something to thought about. As I noted a little bit earlier, that wouldn't be a restriction in and of itself to construct an ADU. We have that flexibility. But during deliberation, if the planning commission would like us to actually carve out, he suggested 1,500 square feet of additional paved area. We'd be happy to explore that further and bring that back if we want to look at some specific additional square footage of exemption that's directly related to the construction of an ADU. Don't have any significant concern for that.
I think it's a great point and very needed. My question would be, do you have any data as to what would be needed?
That's a very good question, and that's something we could provide. Like I said, it will change, right? So I think it's like you have to have at least by like a 3-foot out landing from your doors, and so there's certain things like that. But if you only have 2 small doors, maybe that's
But it also includes the driveway.
right. There's certain things. I mean, you don't necessarily have to have a driveway all the way up to an ADU. So there's certain things. But what we could just look at is, you look at, okay, let's say someone has a 10 by 4 walkway for, that distance, and then has roughly some additional square footage around an ADU. The town can just make a decision that it wants to make sure you get at least the minimum and could go up to whatever seems to be a reasonable square footage. So we can come back with a little bit more clarification on what some bare minimums might look like. And then, what a little bit more reasonable, maybe, okay, you have your landing outside your door, but maybe they should be allowed a 9-by-9 patio or something like that,
Separate question from all this stuff. I had a question around garages for ADUs. Has anybody tried to add a garage to ADU?
So a garage to an ADU is a couple things to look at. So talking about a detached ADU, the town still has a limit of 1,500 square feet of an accessory structure. So if someone wanted to use part of that accessory structure limit as a garage, they would have a smaller ADU, or they could just have a garage right next to their 1,500 square foot structure. That wouldn't be part of
As
it.
a separate.
So it's a matter of, does the town want to allow for larger structures that would include garages? It's something that it hasn't, people have asked about it in the past, but it hasn't become any significant hurdle or challenge to someone building an ADU.
If we talk about a 1,500, it's a discussion item.
Sure. I mean, one thing I'll just note is that to have a structure with an ADU and it's larger, someone builds a garage, they may come in later and say, you have to allow me to convert that garage into part of my ADU. So it's the balance of trying to provide some reasonable,
There's also a balance of rats eating wiring.
Yep, understood. Yep. Yeah, no, yeah, the town did.
1,500 square foot. Like my house when I bought it was 1,400
Yep.
bedrooms.
Yep.
We had a 2-car shed.
Yep.
Sort of thing. So they're actually making a living unit for us, for a family, they were.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely something we can think about more. And yeah, under deliberation, if that's something you want us to look at, increasing the sizes, we can bring that back as well. So that's one item that was brought up by Mr. Patrick. The other item is something that he's actually brought up in the past, and we did think about this definitely. We last time we amended the code, we looked at amending, we did amend the code to allow for taller ADUs on downward sloping lots from public right of ways. And he's brought up the point of, well, you should allow it on upsloping lots too. And one of the examples that I think I most grasped from this is you have a driveway kind of leading up to a flatter area on this upsloping lot. You have this ADU that's kind of, now inward facing towards this flatter part, but they're now on this downward slope, and the downward slope is facing the right of way. Shouldn't that be allowed to be taller? I really appreciate actually that he's also provided some suggested code language. That's always very helpful for us to kind of understand how that could work. This is something that, if the commission would like us to explore further, I would. Some of the, just a little bit hesitation and why I didn't make it into this go around was, you could talk about it just based on the size of a property. The real intent was to be careful of allowing very tall ADUs that are very visible and imposing from the right of way or sometimes to a neighboring property. And just the size of the property sometimes may not be the answer. Maybe distance from a property line, maybe really looking at the height of it. Should it be allowed to be as tall in the back? What should be allowed to go into that space at the bottom? The way we did the downward sloping lots, we said that we don't take our plate height multiplier measurements on the downward sloping lots if the lower level is not for living space. But if you want to make it living space, it's okay, but we're going to then use the multiplier, and that's going to go into the overall size of that building.
I think it would be good to look at, because when I built mine, it was really hard to fit in the plate height, and the ADU is still below my front door.
Yep.
Base of it, so there was a lot of squeezing that had to happen.
So yeah,
Very short garage and a very short house.
Yep, understood. So yeah, so it's definitely a point. I think, I really appreciate the code, and I'd actually start the suggestion, if the commission wants to look at that, I'd start with that, and then look at, maybe providing a couple of guardrails that the commission may want to consider. But that was just the main initial concern, was okay, let's make sure that this works for what we're intending it for. We can look at that further.
Going back to you mentioned more paved area.
Mm-hmm.
Where is that? I didn't see that in the letter.
Oh, so he submitted a second one. So there's two letters. Yes, yeah. So he made a second email that actually just came in right before the meeting. I'm pretty sure everyone got a copy of it.
Just came in.
Well, no, I'm sorry. It should be, yeah. So yeah. So yes, no, he brought that up as well, and it's paved. Or even brought it up, and even kind of specifically mentioned, on our SCP lots, most of them are allowed a 9,000 square foot minimum. Maximum for paved area, and so looking at some additional clear cut paved area exemption for ADUs, be happy to look at that if the commission would like us to. And then I do want to mention this other desk item. It comes in from Steve Lubin. I really commend him for this idea. I totally understand where he's coming from. He's talked about looking at all of the R1 zoning in a similar way to how it was changed for the Glens. The Glens is an R1 zoning district, and as many are aware, I'm sure at least two of you directly are aware, given the detailed hearings we went through then, that, should something like that, or just immediately apply that to all of the R1 districts in town, and that could help provide some more flexibility for ADUs. So, I do think it's something worth exploring. It's a little bit outside of the realm that's directly related to ADUs. It's a little bit larger of a process. We want to look at, the different R1 areas. But point well taken. I just don't know how it would totally weave into this ordinance.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's also interesting there, the size of the lots in Palm Circle
Yep.
are also non-conforming. To me, it was kind of another Glens in a lot of ways.
It is.
right?
It is. No, and you look at the Emerald Lake Hills, they have an R1 area, which shares a lot of the similar areas. And then some of our other R1 areas are kind of right here in the main town corridor. Get over to by Prospect Street. And so it's definitely worth looking into, but I think needs a little bit more holistic approach to it. So with that concludes my presentation. And I think we've gone through the questions. If you have any other additional questions this time, otherwise we can move up to public and then we can go back to deliberation and more questions if you have any.
All right, we will go ahead and open public comment then. Are there members of the public here in the room or on Zoom who would like to make a comment?
I'll go first. Good evening. I'm Steve Patrick. I live at 732 West Glen Way. Congratulations, Chair Gar, on the appointment as chairman. Quite a few years ago, I sat there and it's, I don't know, I was going to say thankless, but it's not. I mean,
After today,
you
right?
got to put your fingerprints on everything for a while, and then it's great that all of you do the public service thing. That's what's needed in this town and in all towns and all communities. So appreciate all your work on that as commissioners. Actually, just kind of piggybacking on what Sage just went over, the 2 points I had, and I think he was pretty clear. I think that there should be some provision for the upsloped lots. And if there's enough, as he says, guardrails, and I kind of pointed out potential guardrails that would be there, like the lot should be big enough. And actually, even in the way it's written now, with the provision for setbacks, that structure would have to follow actually setbacks, not ADU setbacks. So it couldn't be, 4 feet from the back property line or 4 feet from the side property line. It would have to follow all normal setbacks. And, actually, the reason it really came to light was we're working on a project and it's the driveway goes all the way up to the back of the property. And then from the property, it does slope down to the street, but the ADU would be well within or well beyond the 50-foot front setback. So it's no more imposing than even the main house, the main residence could be. It just happens to be the way this was configured over the last probably 40, 50 years. So it seems there should be some provision to allow something with kind of unique circumstance. And actually, sites that are 35%, it is somewhat unique. I mean, they're there. And it seems like they're the more constrained sites are starting to appear as building sites now with ADUs. So having done this for 40 years in town, I realized that this ADU provision is really opening up the possibility for people to, have family homes and, expand that possibility. The other one that kind of came up, and I apologize that I didn't get it as a desk item sooner, but it was kind of late in the day, and I just kind of realized that, we actually was discussed in great length about second driveways. Well, how do you do a second driveway if you're primarily, I said, an SPC site where you're only allowed 9,000 square feet. And if you have a driveway that has to go up, and then you brought up the fire department requirement that you have to do a turnaround in front of your new ADU because you got to be so far, and it's really impossible. So what you have to look at investigating is, well, we'll tear out their front walkway and we'll tear out the pool patio and we'll put gravel around this. And it just seems like it's not the intent. As if you're going to allow ADUs and you're going to allow second driveways, and I don't want to say going to allow, I think it's wonderful that we're allowing ADUs, second driveways, and actually 4 ADUs on a property plus the main house, and then still limit the impervious surface area to 9,000 feet on an SCP lot. It really doesn't calculate. And so love to have you consider that. I think the work that's staff has done and all your deliberations, it's wonderful. I appreciate it. And as Sage pointed out, there is an opportunity to kind of work this over the next month, which is useful. It doesn't have to be a knee-jerk reaction. Say, no, we just can't absorb that much at this time. I think it's really worthwhile that, Sage is going to be able to rework some verbiage in there and make it work for more people in town to have, enjoy family properties. So thanks for your time and your consideration.
Good evening. I'm Carrie Diller, 50 Prospect, homeowner and ADU owner. I also am the founder of Inspired ADUs, an architecture firm focused on ADUs. I think we've just permitted over 300 in the Bay Area, and we have 13 active going in Woodside. It's been amazing working with Sage and the team to get those going, interpret this crazy state law that's changing every few minutes. So I just wanted to give a couple other points for consideration as you start your debate on the topics we've discussed tonight. So the second driveway is super, I think it's a super important thing to make these units really function, improve the fire access. That's a real big point. So I think a simple clarity of trying to add more ADUs and not limiting the driveway to only serving one ADU or saying specifically what it should be serving, I think would be great. Just a simple clarification of that code at that number 3. The 150 square foot exemption to add on for egress and ingress is a strange one that came about a long time ago, but we are actually seeing the need for it, especially with some of the barn conversions we're doing in town, in order to not change the footprint and the integrity of the barn, but to make it a usable, habitable place. That weird little code is actually proving to be helpful in a lot of ADUs we're doing. Because the state limited that code to ingress and egress, it's a little more hard to manipulate and make it into these extra bedrooms and things. And I think we are seeing historically through the years of permitting ADUs that it is helping. If it helps at all on the mechanical equipment, typically those mini split systems are about 6 inches off a unit and can be up to about 20 feet for the line set. So you have some play in terms of what's immediate and not, if that's helpful. I would also support raising that 800 to 1,200 in regard to the flexibility that the planning department has for lots. It was the second upgrade from the 8 to 1,200. There are a lot of lots in Woodside that have really unique, like our home, for example, is a flag lot. So although we have a large parcel, the area where we can do units based on septic and then the fire overlay. So fire department has requirements in terms of how far you can go to be reached by a fire truck to make the project viable. And so sometimes putting those units closer to the front or in the front yard is improving overall life safety, and I don't think is necessarily making a problematic architectural contribution. I think if the planning director and department have a say on that moving that to 1,200 is an excellent thing to do. And then finally, on the legalization thing has been very complicated, and there's a real gap between actually getting units legalized and what the state's done so far. The state has made a long checklist. There's a short checklist and a long checklist. But what they did, as they often do, is leave a lot of ambiguity in the language. So it says that the authority having jurisdiction in terms of the inspectors can approve something if the health and wellness and life safety of the occupants is not harmful. So it's very difficult. The current process we've been going through is that a client has to hire us. We have to design the whole thing, then submit it to the town. Then we get feedback from building, which is asking us to X-ray slabs or prove that there's waterproofing or appropriate rebar. Well, we have several structures from the 40s and 50s that obviously are not going to have any of those things. And if the clients are required to scrape the whole thing, lift it up, put in a new foundation, they're not going to legalize it. So there is a lot of other ways that inspectors could go out in the field. And I do think it could be something that's a paid for service that could either then be reimbursed if you permit the unit or just be a paid for service because people are living in these units. Fire department doesn't necessarily know they're there. You're not necessarily getting tax assessment on them for the tax income. And there are a lot of things that this inspection could catch, like faulty wiring, like plumbing or limited windows or doors for life safety that could be improved. But there are some considerable things that if a slab isn't cracked, if there's no water infiltration, if it looks sound and whole and people have been living there for 20 years, that it's probably okay to keep going. So I think it's not a planning, but if the planning commission made a recommendation to city council that they adopt something like this, it could really, there are a lot of illegal units in Woodside. And I think it would be a great way to get your numbers up, but also just make healthier living for people and make it reasonable because otherwise they're too intrepidatious to move forward. Thank you. And I also support Steve's ideas of extending the paving and thinking about the slope sites where we're just working on one on Glen Craig this morning that could use a little help on that one. So thank you very much.
One follow-up question, maybe to Sage or yourself. The fire department requirements for, is that distance from a road to the structure, or that hasn't come up in any of the projects?
So there's a couple of different pieces with fire. There's the distance from the hydrant to the property, and then there's the distance from where the fire truck can come onto the property or park. And then there's a hose distance from the fire truck where the hose has to get to the rear side of the ADU. So if that exceeds 150 feet, so there's a bunch of different numbers. I'll save you but if either of those two things get exceeded, you can require a hydrant, which makes some projects not plausible for clients, and or fire sprinklers or both, or a fire turnaround, which some properties don't support. So it can really limit kind of the area of where you could actually build an ADU, which you don't necessarily see at the planning side of things. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
For those online, please use the raise hand feature if you'd like to make a comment. I see no raised hands.
Comments in the room? All right, that we will go ahead and close public comment and move on to commissioner deliberation. So we have a lot of things to go through. Maybe we'll go sort of one by one the same way that Sage had done for the initial presentation. Sage, can we do something where you're helping take notes of where do we land on each issue, and then we do motion at the end?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think we can go through each issue and maybe get a straw poll from the commission. It's worth moving forward, and then yes.
And then we do one of these things where you read out the laundry list and
Sounds good.
down we go.
Yep. We don't have to decide language today. We could give time.
No, what you'll do is
That's a
give us
good
a
point.
motion. You'll be providing a motion with direction to staff to come back with specific items.
Yeah. So we would make,
Yeah.
so it'll sort of ratify
Yes.
those are the recommendations.
Those are the
we'd
things
like.
that we'll come back with, and we'll renotice it for the public when that we nail down the date. We'd shoot for the second meeting in May.
Okay. All right. So in that case, let's go back to,
And I could even just, what I've taken so far, and just as we go through a section. So the first item we were talking about was the second driveways. We wanted to look at that one, that it can serve more than one proposed ADU. So we want to make sure that that's clarified. And then also, we want to make sure that that there's more flexibility in the language, specifically in the finding number 3, that would, if there's kind of incidental access to another building, that wouldn't be something that would hold it up, or also even if it connects to some other circulation system on the property, that shouldn't be a limiting factor.
the folks. So deliberation wise, do we all
I'm supportive
with
of that.
those.
Yeah.
I'm good.
Supportive of additional inquiry into that.
Richard?
Supportive. Any additional things we want to add to that? Okay,
Great.
all right, let's move on.
The next one was just going into our definitions. And that was looking at more of the clarification of the permanent stove versus a non-permanent cooking facility.
Mhm.
We'll look at, see how we'll talk to the building department, see if there's any more clarification that we can make that a little bit better.
Perfect. Everyone good with that? Okay. And we had the 150 feet. No, excuse me, the 1,200.
Yeah, so the question is, and I don't know that we got any real significant feedback on that, was that right now we're proposing to exempt up to 1,200. So the first question is, should we exempt it up to 1,200? Or do you want to increase that up to 1,500? If we wanted to increase it higher than 1,200, do you want to say, yeah, that's okay, but maybe only for properties that are an acre or larger? So those were some of the ideas floated.
Yeah. Yeah, so I actually like the concept of 1,500 because that says 1 big bedroom, 2 small bedrooms, so family, 2 kids would fit. That's the size of our house when we first bought it. 1,500 would have been hard to put into my Glenn's lot. We put in 8. 8 was a big. 1,200 wouldn't have really fit. 1,500 definitely wouldn't fit. So I think that for those that can have 1,200, maybe that is a ceiling for smaller lots, and then 1,500 for the bigger lots. Maybe something I'd toss out there. That's it. It seems reasonable. I mean, if the whole town, if you're a SR, whatever what the one is, if that's up to 1,500, why not have that be consistent across the code for all the large lots?
And this one, just to make sure we're all on the same page, this is not, you can still build an ADU up to 1,500, right? This is about the increased TFA.
Yes. But I kind of think that the town wants, it seems like we're all leaning towards making their first ADU free from a TFA point of view. And so if the large lots could make 1,500 and fits, then why not? And the small lots, I just don't think it'll fit with an existing house.
I would actually, I'm in the strange position of wanting to keep it at 1,200 because as was pointed out, 1,500 square feet, that's 1 master, 2 smaller bedrooms that could hold a family of 4. There are lots of tract houses in the East Bay and in Redwood City that fit that description. And that sort of calling that an ADU seems like a really bit of a stretch. If you have a property that's already been developed and maxed out on TFA for the main residence or whatever, essentially being able to drop an extra tract home in there, I can see from an affordable housing and policy standpoint that at one level that's desirable, but on the other hand, it is essentially, we're talking about dropping another small home rather than an ADU on there. And if you're planning a building site, if you want to drop an additional 300 square feet of TFA elsewhere, like give up a garage space or give up a pool house or whatever so that you're not maxed out, then you can have your 1,500 square feet. It's not an issue that is make or break for me, but my inclination would be to limit it to 1,200.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm thinking back to all the Glenn's hearings that we had that Sage, you brought all the great memories back of all the time here spent. And it's, if we also think about the cumulative, what have we added up over time? It is quite a bit. We'll absolutely admit I was one of the people pushing for flexibility in the Glens. It's interesting. So, I mean, let's just take an example, right? Like 7,000 square foot lot would have been a 1,700 square foot home. You know, we added 400 for a garage plus, I think 800 for the ADU plus, this is now sort of going to say it would be another, if we did go to 1,500, another 700. To your point, Darren, these sites fill up, right? And they fill up with things as they are before adding more square footage. So I think we want to be, I just think we want to be mindful of, kind of Lyle, to your point, like once there is that much on a small lot, it does start to,
Would we have,
sorry, just, I think back there, it was like, can you fit even a family on the lot, right? And then I think we're now, it's definitely getting to be a lot. You know,
is there a guardrail on, percent of lot has a house footprint on it?
The Woodside does not have like a lot coverage, a building coverage, only in the commercial district, but not in residential. There's just your floor area limit.
It seems like that might be a way to constrain, so we don't have, 2 square feet around the edge of the property that's grass and everything else is a building, which I think is not our goal.
so with the state mandates, I think maybe quite, so if you have multiple ADUs, so we're talking about 3, 4 on a site.
Those are on acre lots that are giant, right?
Well, not necessarily, right? So what if you add up multiple ADUs that each have, say, a 4-foot setback? Is each one of these subject?
And I'll just remind folks to just, if you speak into the microphones more, just for folks online.
Yeah, so is each one subject to town setbacks at that point, or? Are
Yeah,
they
so what the
subject to-
town has allowed is, up to 800 into the setback. And then this could, with this change, could allow up to 1,200 into the setback.
Into the town setback,
Whereas
not the
the other
4-foot
ones,
setback.
there's all these other different state laws, but generally speaking, let's say you want to do 3 detached ADUs, one of them could go into the basic setback, the other 2 would meet the setback.
Only one could. Okay, yeah.
And so just to the point, this is again, we're looking at exempting floor area. So now if someone gets more square footage exempt from their ADU, so they already have 1,500 square feet, they can now add more square footage onto their house. And so it's, it's that balance. And that's why we didn't go to the full 1,500, trying to look at this incremental step to allow more exemption. That was something that was asked for. But we thought kind of adding, 50% more.
Yeah, but they can't expand the main residence without doing they can use.
That's correct. Yeah, yes.
Have to have the ADU to get.
Correct. You only get to exempt it from the ADU, but just say someone's maxed out now with a 1,500 square foot ADU. You'll be getting more exemption. So now you'll be counting less.
That I can easily envision people that come in and they'll do a do-over and they'll redevelop a property where they come up right to the limit on floor area and paved area, no EDUs. Then they'll come back and they're essentially adding a 3-bedroom house on top of that. That's a freebie. And that's been their plan all along. 1,200. Sure.
Yeah, I think, and certainly I'm more comfortable with 1,200 than 15. And I think if we did go to 15, I think there should likely be a lot size attached to it. But at the same time, I don't know. It starts to
Anyway,
like exactly, yeah. And I mean, to Lyle's point, size wise, I mean there is flexibility within 1,200. I think to make it's not necessarily a large house, but it can be a 2-3 bedroom. And then they can make those trade-offs on, do they want to allocate 300 feet to a 1-car garage or not?
what is the, if you had 2-acre lot, how big could the main residence be? Smells
It depends on the zoning. Zonings have different, but generally speaking, let's say an SR zoning, it's a 1 acre minimum. And in that zoning district, in 1 acre, you're going to get about a little under 8,000. So if you had 2 acres, you're going to be getting closer to like 15,000.
300 is pocket change then.
And 3-acre lots, you know, I'll have a smaller percentage, but yet they're still getting closer to the 12,000. You go into the hills, they're in the western hills, they have lower percentages. But if they have a very large lot, they could still have more square feet.
So currently, Sage, there is no difference on a lot that's exactly 1 acre compared with something that's 10,000 square feet as far as the number of ADUs that you can build and the size.
There is currently that right now, if you're an acre or larger, you get the 3 ADUs plus a JADU. And if you're less than an acre,
Well, I'm talking about the ones that are an acre or less.
yeah, so the smaller ones right now, under state law, you still get those, you know,
3,
the 3 that I was talking about.
right.
But if someone wants to go outside of that, because we allow larger and more flexibility, they could do 1 ADU and 1 JADU, and the ADU could be attached or detached.
Or the conversion also, and the conversion also.
If they followed, yes, for all the specific standards, they could do that.
Okay. There's a huge difference between a 0.99 acre and a 7,000 foot.
Yep.
You add all these pieces up and it starts to become like, how many ADUs do you need? Like, it's starting to get like, I don't know, like with if you take.
Yeah, but the number of ADUs has not really skyrocketed. I mean, we're under our allocation for the, 2031.
Yeah, they take time. I mean, we just heard, one individual has 13 projects under, so I mean, they are getting built.
But that's a major individual.
Yeah, there's some more, we are seeing numbers increase. I mean, since, prior to our housing element, we did a 4-year average. That was 15 units per year. Since then, with a lot of these different changes, we've averaged over 20 per year. We're getting, January, we had no permits issued. In March, we had 5 ADUs issued. And so, we are seeing more units coming out with some flexibility. Question is how much?
Yeah, and that's that's the flexibility that's already in place.
Right.
I'm actually remembering a lot of the discussions we had when we were looking at these sort of 2-3 years back. And I think it was Maryland at the time was making the point that, like, hey, how much do we really want to unilaterally add leniency, knowing that the regulations are going to continue in that direction from Sacramento? So, I mean, to a large extent, I only expect that to be more just the way that the sort of tea leaves are going or the trends have been going. Not that past results are guarantees of future or whatever, but at the same time, I don't like 1,500 from that standpoint. Even 1,200, it feels like there's going to be some regulation that goes beyond that anyway. I don't know that that's a flexibility we need to offer. So, like, personally, I'm not convinced we need to do anything on this. I'm not comfortable going beyond 1,200. I can probably get to 1,200.
Okay.
Being okay.
So we've heard, mostly sounds consistent with straw poll on looking at just keeping it at 1,200 or any further direction.
Yeah, I would go maximum 1,200, and then in the future, if we see trends developing in a certain direction, it can always be changed. We can always have another ordinance passed as far as stipulations for either increasing it or keeping it the same. I mean, we have that flexibility, so I certainly wouldn't be a proponent to go up to 1,500 at this point.
Yeah, our take was kind of take initial steps. It's a little harder to pull back on those once you've gone a certain point.
Yeah, 100%. Well, are you still at 1,200 or?
I'm good with 1,200.
Yeah, I'm with perspective of what's possible in larger lots. Yeah, they don't need the extra.
Okay, great. So, we'll have no further direction on that item. We're leaving it at 1,200.
Yep. Let's leave that one. Let that one lie.
Okay. The other item that we heard some feedback on, this was right at roof overhangs where I didn't heard no feedback there, but you can let us know if you have any. And then mechanical equipment was looking at to try to better clarify the immediately adjacent term. But if there's anything further, let us know.
Roof overhangs, does anyone have passion there or seem good?
No passion on overhangs.
Yeah, I think that seems good to me. I do like the specification of just these subjective things are just hard for people when it's not sort of clearly defined. So it'd be great.
So then we moved on to, we were looking at the exception. So this is their plan director exception, and heard comments on looking at kind of clarifying feasibility, and then also whether or not it's built into this ordinance, or if the town kind of looks more at kind of like a form or steps that people can kind of follow to kind of how best to approach the need to provide their kind of feasibility analysis. And again, we're trying to keep it very simple and objective. So we can look at clarifying the feasibility statement in the ordinance, and then also maybe accompanied with some draft handouts that we could provide folks.
I think when I read the language, I also maybe clarified that it's the planning director who would certify feasibility, not feasibility. I think it was very subjective. Didn't seem like it was a very clear sage thou shalt declare it feasible, unfeasible, and make a record known sort of thing. So some way to make sure it's truly a staff decision by planning director that has to sign off on it.
That makes sense to me as well.
This one I'm not sure we should increase, to be honest. I mean, we are, I guess, I think some degree of oversight might not be a bad thing. I mean, when we're talking about 1,200, it does start to be, it's getting closer to home than sort of smaller ADU. I mean, there is we should remember there is a variance process.
We could also
right? Folks can go through.
have the planning director sign off on it. By signing off, I meaning presenting to planning commission that, you know, what was declared feasible, like as type of like or report out.
I think it's basically a variance though at that point, because it's coming and making findings, et cetera. So they would still have that flexibility to come in, present findings.
Question for Sage and also for Gene. I mean, there's an exception to every rule, right? So if you had, I mean, if we limited it to 800 and there was a lot that had some unique features and everybody ended up scratching their heads, and yes, there was the only way to do the allowed, structure was to put it in the front setback, we could do that via variance, correct?
That's correct.
And given the fact that the planning commission is not overwhelmed with having 2 meetings a month where we're doing 3 variances at every meeting, I mean, we're doing very few of these, we could tolerate handling those exemptions.
That's similar to the support I was trying to.
Yeah.
There's still that flexibility. So we're not saying no.
Yeah.
Right. I do think, I don't know, I think given how much things are changing, it is worth still looking at some of those pieces in terms of how it builds out. And so I would probably be more comfortable with this one being a variance process.
So heard comments about maybe keeping it 800 and 1,200 was the proposal. And just for discussion purposes, 1,000 square feet, nothing, just the direction to bring that back.
800.
Keep it at
Yeah, I would probably say keep it 800 on this one.
Then on an exception basis.
Yeah, and
Correct.
that already exists.
And that would always be
You don't say
available.
anything there.
Yeah.
So just to clarify, this allows planning department to declare it is unfeasible to work it without a variance. If it's less than 800, they could do it themselves. If it's more than 800, they come talk.
Right, which is as is.
Yep.
Oh. Got it.
Yep.
Except we probably should have still.
We're still looking at the clarity part, just the number, we'll keep it 800.
Okay.
I didn't hear any comments on the changing the number of units for this government code, section 66323. I mean, essentially, the code, the other option was to be just allow more ADUs on the smaller properties, but from what I've heard, I think there's a move for that.
So I'm sorry, Sage, which particular language?
Sorry, this was just, this is on, it's on page 10. It's the table.
Yes, the asterisks we discussed.
Yeah, the asterisks, exactly. So that's something that's allowed already by state law, and we're
Yeah.
just making sure it's clarified.
We're just clarifying it. Nope. Okay, I think we're good there.
Okay. Oh, so now we're on page 13. And this is just about the owner occupancy. And so there's two items we're going to look at to clarify that if it's not owner occupied, that only the house would be rented out. And we're also going to look at if there's even a requirement to have owner occupancy by state law. And if there's not, we'll provide that option as well.
And then a sublet would still be allowable under this, right?
Well, you can always have sublets going on under the table. so-
Yeah, I don't know what we're trying to achieve with this one is kind of the thing. I would.
We should strike the whole.
Stricken. It just seems like there's all these, we don't need it and you can
I
sublet.
think that's one of his action items
J-
is
So, and because this is what Gene is reminding me that we think the state might require that you have to have this in place. So we're going to double check that based on the new updated laws. We just want to double check that. If it is, we'll let you know and we'll make sure we have some clarity. And if it's not, we'll provide you with the option
It's good.
to remove it. Okay, then we are really down to we'll just look at, we understood that this is a policy decision, kind of looking at the town inspectors for the amnesty program. Does the planning commission in their recommendation to town council want to recommend that the town council explore the idea of the town having town inspectors, whether it's for a fee or not? It's something the town council could consider. It's just part of what you would be recommending to the planning commission.
Would that be a separate recommendation from this?
It's
process?
what we would do is just build it into the resolution itself. It wouldn't be in the actual ordinance language. It will just be something that we could say, this is what the planning commission recommended for the town council to explore to help assist people with unpermitted ADUs.
I mean, from my perspective, it's nice to have a friend who can kind of help you through this complex process. So an inspector could be good for that. I do think it's important. We talked about sort of if we do a program like this, just limiting the liability, because to the earlier point, like if they miss something and folks discover it, we don't want to, be on the hook for that. And probably unfair to have a contract inspector, liable for that.
Right, and as noted, the town, people can always hire their own general contractors, and they can give them their recommendations.
Yeah.
To some of the town.
Yeah, I think we'd need to frame it as an advisory service or something of that nature.
Sure.
Would definitely encourage the amnesty, because we should have these properties on the list and register, so we know that they exist, and if they're on fire, that they don't get out.
Yeah, and we're not making any decisions on that part, I believe.
Yeah,
Right?
it's just simply moving forward a recommendation to the town council. So when we bring this back, we can just provide that small recommendation into the resolution itself.
I think it's great.
Okay. So then there's just two other items that we're going to talk about if you'd like us to look into further. And that is specifically exempting additional paved area as it relates to construction of ADUs. And the other piece was looking at potentially allowing for some height increases for upsloping lots.
Or both those.
I would say on the paved area one, kind of similar with my points on cumulative impact. It would be good maybe, so I support looking at it. Also, if that yields 90% surface coverage with paved area, that feels like a bad outcome.
Yeah, we could.
So
look
we
at
may
that
want to have
more.
some kind of a cap.
Yeah, no, we
Maybe
could
being
look.
mindful of the.
Yeah, we
cumulative
could
impact.
definitely look at that.
No clue as to whether 1,500 would be the right number or not.
Yeah, and that was just something brought up by a member of the public.
Yes.
And so I think in terms of, do you want, all you have is building and paving. Right?
Yeah, I mean, because you add all this up.
So,
it's gonna be a
and
bunch.
what was mentioned too was, some of these larger lots in the SCP areas, they're already restricted to 9,000, whereas, lots in a 1 acre lot, over in Woodside Hills, they can have 15,000 square feet. And so we can kind of look at some of the lot size issues, and then maybe some caps for those kind of exemptions.
It might be helpful also when we consider this next, if it's possible to look at maybe just example scenarios.
We'll try to provide.
You know what I mean? Like maybe say, a 7,000 square foot lot. If it were to be maxed out with all the things that we're approving, like what does that look like? Because at a certain point, we have to help with Sacramento. We also have to uphold general plan. And if we get 95% paved area, we are not doing our job upholding the general plan also. So I think that balancing, it'd be good to just see what that looks like.
So
5,000 to 10,000 to 15,000. We don't have to do that many scenarios, but some that I think just helps us
visualize it.
Visualize this.
So we'll take that direction. So we'll explore it further and bring some stuff back for you.
Awesome. Okay.
I would explore it further, maybe see what number would be reasonable that would make most projects work. And then, once again, if you get the exception to the rule, you can always go through the variance process.
Yep.
And if somebody needs an extra 200 square feet of paved area to be able to have paved access to the ADU, then, that would be the presumption that would pass.
And we still, for the 800 square foot unit, if that's all someone can fit, or that's what they need, some extra paved areas to do that 800 square foot unit, that town staff still has some flexibility there.
No.
And that was based on the section we were just debating about 800 to 1,200. Yep.
Right. And then, sorry, I guess we didn't talk that much about the height piece.
So this is the last piece.
Yeah. So on that one, I like that the proposal limits based. I think the language was well written that it's limited to not make any structure that's more impactful than the previous main residence could have been. So that part feels good. Seems reasonable to consider to me. What do folks think?
Just have them explore it. There's.
Yeah, we can explore some language if all of you are kind of in agreement with that.
For any opposition?
Nope.
Okay. I think we're
Okay.
we're good with exploring that.
Yep.
So we walked through everything. With this,
Talk about the,
sorry, go ahead.
The height.
R
slope.
R1 Glens versus the
Slope.
the R1s.
Yeah. So with that, that's
Is that a separate part of the code?
it's well more than just ADUs. And so whereas that in and of itself could help with flexibility on ADUs, it's more about, could my house be closer to a property line like what we did in the Glens? So that, a very good point. I am an extremely point well taken, but it's
Different project.
yeah, I think it encompasses much more than just ADUs.
Yeah. And my recommendation there would be R1 is probably not the scope. It's probably more like the Glens was a sort of coherent, or an area where there's a common issue of a concentration of non-conforming lots, right? And we have others. It seems like Palm Circle is one of those.
Well, yeah,
So I would suggest we're just more mindful of the granularity and boundary of the
Yeah.
study rather than saying like all R1 blank.
then yes, no, for sure. And that's something, it's in working with the town council on priorities and what the various different work items that.
It feels like it would be another like agendized Glens style thing, right? With a defined scope of which lots are in.
Okay, so with that, because we're just bringing stuff, we got a direction from you. We didn't have any split issues on any of these. We're just going to explore the different things based on the direction given. We do not need a motion. We've taken all the notes. We've looked at the consensus made by the Planning Commission, and we will bring all this stuff back to you to explore further and maybe for an adoption of a recommendation to the town council.
Sounds great. Yeah, I think these scenarios, just final thought, I know maybe just repeating myself, but these scenarios I think are going to be helpful because we're saying things like we like going from 800 to 1200, but not 1500, but we're also sort of thinking that without the cumulative impact. So I just think that'll be important for us to look at with a fresh set of eyes in terms of what it means. Cool. Anything else?
So that would conclude this item. And there's just a couple of, if you want to move on to the agenda, I think we just have director's reports.
All right, let's move on to director's report. Thank you for the cue.
And apologize, I don't have those right here in front of me, but essentially it's like my computer died. Yeah, so what I'll report is, you know, I know in February, I think, oh, thank you very much, Jim. So, you know, what we've kind of the primary thing, these reports that I think has been most interesting is just looking at the number of permits were issued per month. And so this one in February, the town issued 3 permits for ADUs and 1 for a new single-family dwelling. And then, as I noted in March, that we had 6 ADUs. One of them was a JADU, but we had 6 ADUs in March and 1 single-family dwelling. So, whereas we had none issued in January, but you know, people are coming off the holidays. You know, there's different reasons maybe why that was a lower number. But as we progress through the summer, you know, if we can keep up 4 to 6+ ADUs a month, that would be great. And so with that, that concludes my report. I don't have anything further to add this time.
Okay. All right. Well, if we're all done, we will go ahead and adjourn. Thank you.